Can you pretend to be my husband for Christmas? Chinese widow begged rancher to save her newborn. Snow fell in slow, drifting veils across the dry river crossing. The main street of Redemption Gulch lay frozen under a pale morning light. Boards and rooftops were rimmed in white frost, and horses steamed gently at their hitching rails. Folk stood clustered near the mercantile porch, shawls and coats wrapped tight. Their faces held that winter-hard expression of people who had seen too much and given too little back. Mai Lin stood alone at the street center, her thin slippers half sunk in the slush. The cold bit through her worn, tattered cheongsam, but shame burned hot enough to keep her upright. A faded red scarf was wrapped around her shoulders, its edges frayed, fluttering like a torn flag surrendered to the wind. She held a small, swaddled bundle close to her chest, trying to shield the infant within from the biting air. "You owe me," Gideon Thorne said, his voice loud enough to strike the windows with its echo. His fur coat hung heavy, black pelts glistening with snowmelt. 1 week under my roof, 1 meal a day. Was that not enough to keep you from freezing? And you think you can just walk away? A murmur moved through the crowd. Nobody met Mai Lin's eyes. They knew what kind of man Thorne was, they simply did not care enough to interfere. Mai Lin swallowed hard. "I worked," she said, though the words came thin and quiet in her accented English. "Cleaning, mending, tending your kitchens. I paid my keep." Thorne's smile twisted like rope. "Is that so? Because I remember you sleeping under my roof. That comes at a price." He spread his hands wide. A few townsfolk shifted, not from sympathy, but from discomfort. Mai Lin said nothing. Silence was sometimes the only weapon left to someone with nothing. "Say it, then," Thorne pressed, enjoying her humiliation. "Say you've nothing to pay your debt with." Her heartbeat roared in her ears. Her breath stuck in her chest. Then another voice broke across the street, low and deep as winter thunder. "She's not yours to claim." The crowd stilled. A tall rancher stepped forward from near the blacksmith's forge, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy sheepskin coat. Snow steamed against the brim of his hat. His eyes were a quiet gray, like a fire banked low. Cole was a man who spoke little, a man whose ranch bordered the wilderness and whose solitude was a thing of local legend. Thorne lifted his chin. "This is none of your concern, rancher." Cole didn't blink. "I'm making it mine." Mai Lin stared at him, unable to understand. She had never spoken to him. Nothing tied them together but the same cold ground. Pastor Evans emerged from the mercantile's doorway, his silver cross glinting. "Let us keep our tempers," he said, his voice falsely gentle. "The woman has no home. She will only suffer if she continues wandering. And the child," he nodded toward the bundle, "will not last long in such conditions. Christmas is a time for charity. It may be best to let the church take the infant." Something inside Mai Lin sharpened into pure terror. "No," she said, the word a raw gasp. The pastor sighed as if he pitied her. "You are a widow, alone. A child needs warmth and a father's protection. You have neither." Mai Lin's fingers trembled, barely, but enough for Cole to see the truth. The baby was weakening. This scene was not about debt. Not truly. It was about a life too small to defend itself. Thorne smiled again. "You see? No home, no claim. Any of us could step in. You don't even have a husband to say she's yours." Mai Lin turned to Cole. Her eyes met his, steady, grieving, and now, pleading. "If you would," she said quietly, the words meant for him, though everyone heard. "If I say you are my husband, just for Christmas, they cannot take him. I must find a warm place. He can live, but I cannot make it alone." Cole felt the world narrow to a single choice. He was a man who kept to himself, who had no family left to protect. But here was something that mattered. A child's breath. A small hand curled into life. Cole laid a large, gloved hand on the swaddled bundle. The baby stirred, a warm presence against his fingers. He looked at Thorn, then at the pastor, then at the silent crowd. "I am her husband," he said, his voice steady and clear, "and this child is ours." The street seemed to exhale. Thorn stepped back, his pleasure souring into something darker. But he said nothing more. Not now. Cole's shoulders eased, a small, quiet thing, but Mai Lin felt it. The silence that followed was not approval, but restraint. A claim made in the open held weight here, and no one wished to be the first to break it. Pastor Evans folded his hands. Then, "May the Lord bless this union," he said, though his eyes remained cold. Thorn gave a short, harsh laugh. "Enjoy the winter, rancher." He turned away without another word. The crowd drifted off soon after, conversation low and uneasy. Mai Lin understood then that she had not asked for pride nor for show. She had asked for her child's chance to live. Cole adjusted the worn hat on his head. "We should go," he murmured. "He needs warmth." Mai Lin nodded and stepped to his side. Together they left the street behind, snow closing softly around their footprints. She felt the weight of the moment settle slowly, like snow layering roof and branch. She did not know this man, nor the road ahead, nor whether the lie they spoke would collapse under its own fragile shape. But the child's faint breath against the cold air anchored her resolve. Some truths were chosen, not born. The line cabin stood at the edge of the pinewoods, its roof bowed under winter's weight. Logs were darkened with age and storms. Smoke drifted thinly from the chimney, a ghostly thread unraveling into the white sky. Mai Lin followed Cole up the narrow trail, her slippers crunching through crusted snow. Each breath stung her lungs. The cold was deeper here, untouched by the small warmth of town. The baby's faint murmurs rose and fell against her chest, as though he dreamed of warmer worlds. Inside, the cabin was spare, one table, 2 stools, a narrow bed of pine branches and quilts worn by long use. A small crate sat near the hearth, a makeshift cradle lined with a spare blanket. That simple provision, though rough, spoke of a hope that lingered still. Mai Lin set the baby down with careful grace, as though each motion had been practiced 1,000 times. She removed her red scarf and draped it beside the small, sleeping form. The fire flickered low, its embers pulsing like tired hearts. Cole went to stir them, adding sticks with slow precision. The silence stretched, not as emptiness, but as something waiting. Mai Lin felt the weight of her decision settle fully. In town, words had been smoke. Here, they were walls and a roof and a winter night stretching long. She did not regret them, but she understood their substance. Cole poured water from a clay jug into a small pot, setting it over the fire. "He needs warmth more than anything," he said, his voice low. "His lungs are weak. I do what I can." Mai Lin nodded. "What do you feed him?" "Goat's milk when I can get it from town. Mixed with a little broth. It's not enough." She glanced at the crate. Her son's breaths were small and quick, like a bird's. Mai Lin knelt and touched the child's hand. The tiny fingers curled instinctively. A tremor passed through her, something tender and unexpected. Cole busied himself at the table as though giving her space. "There's work to be done." Snow blocks the roofline. The woodpile is low. "I can help," Mai Lin said. He looked at her then, really looked for the first time. Not as a claim or a bargain, but as a person sharing his burden. "You're tired," he said. "So are you." Something passed between them, quiet as falling frost. They worked without many words. Mai Lin gathered wood near the tree line, dragging branches back through thigh-deep snow. Her hands numbed, then burned, then settled into a rhythm of ache. Cole climbed the roof with a long-handled rake, sweeping snow off in careful strokes so the cabin would not collapse under winter's weight. When they paused, breath steaming in the frozen air, they did not speak. They did not need to. Inside again, Mai Lin's fingers fumbled with the pot over the fire. The stew she tried to make from their meager supplies tasted thin and bitter. She bit her lip, ashamed. Cole tasted it without comment. Then he added a handful of crushed dried berries and a pinch of salt from a small leather pouch. He stirred it once and handed the bowl back to her. "It's better," he said simply. She tried it again. It was. That night, wind howled outside, rattling the shutters like restless spirits. The fire cast long shadows over the cabin walls. My Lin sat on the floor near the cradle, her back against the bed frame, the child cradled in the crook of her arm as she fed him with a small, carved spoon. Cole watched from the opposite side of the hearth. "You loved his father deeply," he said, the words a statement, not a question. My Lin's eyes did not lift, but something in her face shifted. "Yes." Cole waited, but no more words followed. He did not owe her his story, and she did not owe him her grief. He respected the silence that held it. The baby coughed suddenly, a small, strained sound that cut through the room like a blade. My Lin straightened at once. Cole moved without thinking, reaching the cradle as she did. The child's breaths came fast and shallow. My Lin remembered a winter in her homeland, sitting at her own mother's bedside as sickness hollowed the air. She remembered wet cloths folded on fevered skin, whispered songs to soothe the trembling. She gathered warm stones from near the fire pit and wrapped them in cloth, tucking them around the infant. She lifted the child and held him close, rocking slowly, breathing warm air against the baby's cheek. "Hush now," she murmured in her native tongue. "Stay with us. Don't slip away." Cole watched her. His face was a landscape of pain held still. My Lin did not look away. They stood like that, two strangers tied by the life between them. Minutes passed. The baby's breathing steadied. His eyelids fluttered, not struggling now, but resting. My Lin let out a long, shaking breath. Cole did as well. He placed his hand lightly on her sleeve. The touch was brief, no more than an acknowledgement, but it held the weight of everything unspoken. "Thank you," he said. The words were not polite. They were raw. My Lin felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. The next day settled into a rhythm. My Lin warmed stones each morning, tended the fire, and swept frost from the inside window panes. Cole trapped rabbits and checked snares, returning with meat and pine boughs. When she mended, he carved. When she stoked the fire, he watched the child. They spoke in small fragments. "Storm tonight, yes," he smiled in his sleep. He does that sometimes, and nothing more was needed. One evening, after the sky turned violet and the pines glittered with ice, My Lin stepped outside. The air was so still it held every sound, the distant owl call, the creak of snow-laden branches. She wrapped her red scarf tighter and listened to her own heartbeat. Footsteps approached softly, careful not to startle. Cole stopped beside her, looking over the same winter world. "You do not ask about my ranch," he said. "I assume you'll take us there when it's safe to go." Yes, silence, a shared one. The kind that carried its own warmth. "You are strong," Cole said. My Lin shook her head, snow catching on her lashes. "No. I just keep going." "That is strength." The wind lifted lightly then, swirling snow around them in a slow dance. She felt suddenly seen, not as a burden, not pitied, but understood. Inside, the baby gave a soft cry. My Lin and Cole turned at the same moment. They moved together. The morning came pale and brittle. Snow crusted hard over the world, making every step sound loud enough to break the silence. My Lin had just finished tidying their small space when she heard the crunch of hooves down the slope. She knew before she saw them. Some things the body remembers before the mind catches up. She straightened slowly, her fingers tightening into fists at her sides. 3 riders pushed through the pine shadows. Fur coats, rifles slung careless. Gideon Thorne rode at their front, seated tall on a dapple-grey horse. Frost clung to his beard, and his eyes glittered with the grim satisfaction of a man who has come to collect. Cole stepped from the cabin door without needing to be called, the baby safe inside, cradled in blankets warmed near the fire. He did not take up a rifle. He didn't need one. His presence alone seemed to steady the cold air. Gideon smiled like a wolf baring teeth. "Mighty cozy little homestead you've got here." My Lin lifted her chin. You are not welcome here. That depends on who holds the claim. Gideon tapped his gloved fingers against his saddle horn. Word reached me that you've gone and married yourself to this rancher. That true? His gaze landed on her scarf, on the crate glimpsed through the open doorway. My Lin forced her breath steady. Yes. Gideon leaned forward as if savoring the word. Funny. You never mentioned any husband when you stayed under my roof. You knew I was alone, she said. He shrugged. A widow still has debts. Cole stepped in front of her without haste, without threat, simply making it known she did not stand alone. You will leave, Cole said softly. The snow seemed to still around his voice. One of the men with thorns snorted. Another gripped the butt of his rifle, half daring, half afraid. Gideon dismounted slowly, his boots sinking deep. Now see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You folk think you can just claim something and make it yours. A woman, a child, a future. But property, he smiled, cold and wide, needs proof. Cole's gaze did not waver. She is not property. Gideon laughed. Maybe not to you, but the law doesn't live in this cabin. The law lives in town. Under my roof. My Lin felt the old panic crawl up her ribs, but she fought it down. She would not go back. Not to silence, not to hunger, not to being held like an old thing. The baby is mine, she said, her voice clear. Born of my blood. Gideon's expression flickered. Something hungry moved under his skin. An orphan fetches good coin in the cities. You haven't the means to keep him. Winter's too deep. A big storm's coming. I'm doing you a mercy. My Lin stepped closer to Cole. We don't need your mercy. One of the men raised his rifle as if to punctuate the threat. But Cole didn't move, not a muscle. He simply looked at the men like he was seeing something small and insignificant. The air felt tight as a snare wire. Leave, Cole repeated. Still quiet. Still final. For a long moment, the wind was the only thing that moved. Then Gideon spat into the snow. 1 week, he growled. If you're still here in 1 week, I come back with the law at my side, and I take what's owed. He mounted, jerked the reins, and the riders turned and vanished into the pines. The silence they left behind felt heavier than any sound. My Lin let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. He'll come back. Yes, Cole said. And he'll bring more men. Yes, the baby cried inside the cabin, a thin, weary sound. My Lin moved to him without thinking. Cole followed, closing the door behind them against the world. Ant's face was flushed, his breath sharp. My Lin pressed him to her chest, feeling the tremble of effort in that tiny body. Cole touched the child's brow, and his jaw tightened. The storm is coming tonight, he murmured. If we stay here, the cold will take him. If we leave, the snow may take us. My Lin held the child closer, rocking him gently. What is the distance to your ranch? A day's travel in clear weather. Cole glanced toward the shuttered window. This storm will cut that time in half. There's only one path that stays open in deep snow, across the high ridge. My Lin had seen that ridge once from a far, safe distance. Jagged, wind-beaten. A place where the world tried to throw you back. Can we make it? She asked. We must. There was no argument. No other road. No other choice. The decision was made in the quiet grief of necessity. My Lin packed the blankets. Cole lashed snowshoes and dried meat to a travel frame. The cabin that had begun to feel like the shape of safety now looked like something temporary, something that belonged to another life already fading behind them. When they stepped outside, the sky had dimmed to iron. Snow began to fall in bitter, sharp-edged flakes. My Lin wrapped the baby against her chest beneath layers of her clothing and shawl. Cole pulled his coat tight, settling his hat firmly on his head. They moved into the pines, leaving only shallow impressions in the snow at first. But as they climbed, the drifts deepened. Wind tore through the trees, stinging their faces. My Lin carried the child, and Cole carried the greater burden of supplies. He kept pace beside her, refusing to let her fall behind. Hours passed. The ridge rose before them, white, bleak, merciless. The wind howled through its stone teeth like some ancient grief. My Lin's breaths grew heavy, though her stride never faltered. Her legs burned. Frost bit her fingers. Her lungs felt carved raw. But she said nothing. The child's faint breaths were the only rhythm that mattered. Halfway up the ridge, her slippered foot slipped on ice hidden beneath the snow. She pitched forward, catching herself with her bare hands. Pain jolted up her arms. The world tilted. Snow roared past her ears. Cole turned instantly. My Lin tried to stand, but her legs folded beneath her. The cold slammed into her bones, rushing in like something that had been waiting. Cole shifted the supply pack to one shoulder and lifted My Lin into his arms. She tried to protest. She had sworn never to be a burden, but the words did not form. Her breath came in ragged shivers. "No one is left behind," Cole said, his voice steady against the storm. The wind tore at them. Snow blinded them. But Cole carried her. Step by step, the ridge crest began to take shape. A faint orange glow flickered in the distance, the lamps of his ranch house, waiting like a promise. My Lin tightened her fingers weakly in the fabric of his coat, her heart pounding, not from fear now, but from something deeper. Trust. Something that felt like a beginning. They did not stop. They did not look back. The storm closed behind them, swallowing the world, leaving only the three of them moving forward together. The ranch house sat among the pines like an ember in a sea of white. Smoke rose in gentle columns, carrying the scent of cedar and sage. Voices murmured inside, softened by thick wooden walls. My Lin lay near the hearth, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, her breath finally steady. The long journey had drained her, leaving her weak and trembling. Yet her eyes remained open, fixed on the small cradle beside her. And slept, his breaths deeper now, warmed by the fire, milk, and the careful hands of an old ranch hand named Gus. Cole stood near the entrance, speaking with Gus, who had examined the child with practiced care. The old man nodded once, a firm, approving gesture. "He'll live," Gus said. "Because you carried them through the storm. Because his mother didn't let him fade." His gaze shifted to My Lin. Respect, quiet and real. She lowered her eyes, not feeling worthy of such regard, but taking it all the same. Snow fell thick outside, though the wind had gentled. This place felt like a world apart, held safe for one brief breath in the long winter. But safety never lasted. The first sign was the distant sound of hooves. Slow, measured, purposeful. My Lin felt the shift before anyone spoke. Cole turned his head, his shoulders tightening. The room fell silent as if every soul inside recognized the change in the air. He stepped outside into the grey light. My Lin rose, gripping the cradle's edge to steady herself before following him. Gideon Thorne sat atop his horse at the clearing's edge, his coat heavy with storm-wet fur. Behind him rode 5 men, armed and grim. Their horses snorted steam, and their boots gleamed with ice. The lawman's badge caught the faint light beneath his coat. Gideon's smile was cold. "Took you long enough to get here," he said. "I've come to claim what's owed." Cole did not touch the pistol at his belt. He needed no gesture. His stillness was enough. "There is no debt." Gideon laughed. "It isn't about debt anymore. It's about principle. A man can't just walk off with what belongs to another. A woman, a child, a life. Folks will start thinking they can just choose things for themselves." My Lin stepped forward, though she could barely feel her feet. "I chose this. You can't take me back." Gideon's eyes slid to her, cold as lake ice. "Girl, you chose nothing. You were running. I offered shelter. That gives me a claim." "No," My Lin said, steady as the frozen ground beneath her. "It gives you a memory. Nothing more." The lead lawman leaned from his saddle. Let's settle this clean. The child must be inspected. If he's not yours by marriage, he can be taken to town custody. Cole's jaw tightened. You will not take him. Gideon raised his hand. Bring me the child. My Lin stepped in front of Cole then, her body moving before her mind could argue. She stood between the men and her family. Her red scarf whipped in the wind, torn and frayed, but held tight. You'll cross me to take him, she said. The men shifted uneasily. The lawman hesitated. Something about her, small, trembling, but unbreakable, made the air hold still. Gideon's voice snapped like brittle wood. Move aside. No. A single heartbeat passed. Gideon reached for his gun. Cole moved first, not with fury, but with a terrible calm. He stepped forward, his hand closing around Gideon's wrist before the pistol cleared its holster. In one smooth, brutal motion, he twisted. Bone cracked like ice under a boot. Gideon cried out, falling from his saddle, snow puffing up around him. The other men drew their rifles, but Cole did not retreat. He stood over Gideon, one boot planted in the snow, his breath rising slow and steady. You see us as property, Cole said, his voice low, resonant with something older than law. But we are not yours. We belong only to the lives we choose and the ones we protect. Gideon clutched his broken wrist, gasping, fury twisting his face. But he saw Gus and two other ranch hands gathering now, rifles held firm. He saw the lawman shift uncertainly. This was not a place ruled by his reach. You think this ends it, he spat. You'll always be running. Cole looked to Mai Lin. She met his eyes and felt something anchor inside her. Not fear, not hope, but certainty. We are not running anymore, she said. Gideon's gaze flickered. Something in it, a recognition of defeat, dulled the sharp edges of his rage. He gave the slightest nod to the lawman, a surrender shaped not by acceptance, but by the knowledge that force would only break him further. The men turned their horses and rode back into the snowfall, their shapes dissolving into white. Gideon lingered a moment longer, breath harsh, eyes dark with something unsaid. Then he mounted and followed, swallowed by the winter woods. Silence settled again, but it was different now, full, not hollow. Mai Lin's legs buckled then, not from fear, but from the release of it. Cole caught her before she hit the ground. His arms, solid and steady, wrapped around her as though they had always belonged there. Their foreheads touched, snow gathering softly in their hair. No grand declaration passed between them, just the truth shared in breath and quiet presence. Inside the ranch house, and stirred and gave a small, contented sound. Spring arrived slowly. Snow melted in gentle rivulets, feeding the streams, bringing green shoots to the valley floor. Mai Lin walked outside, carrying the baby on her hip. Her shawl was patched again, this time with careful stitches of red thread. Cole sat near the porch, carving a new cradle from fresh wood. Designs were etched along its edge, mountains, pine trees, and three figures, a man, a woman, and a child, walking side by side. The cradle glowed in the sunlight, warm and golden. Mai Lin approached. Cole looked up, not questioning, not asking, simply seeing her. No more pretending, he said quietly. She found her answer already waiting in her chest. I'm staying. And cooed, reaching a tiny hand toward the cradle that would soon be his. Snowmelt trickled, the world breathed, and three sets of footprints led forward into the warmth of a new season.